Hello, my name is Andrew Lutz. I'm an associate professor at Johnson County Community College in Overland Park, Kansas. Thank you for taking the time to view my poster on developing and hosting your own cybersecurity competition. Just to briefly discuss the poster and how to do this, so we've recently, over the last 2 years, developed our own cybersecurity competition, and these are some of our lessons learned. So I hope that you could just take a couple of things away from our poster here that would be helpful to you if you plan to develop a competition or if you already have one and maybe it gives you a couple of new ideas. So when you talk about planning your own cybersecurity competition, some of the things you want to think about, as you'll see on the poster. So what skills do you want students to master? And I'd be specific there. Really try to identify some critical skills you want students to come away with and then narrow your scope to that focus. You can expand it in the future, but if you're first developing a competition, it's very easy, as I found, to want to do a lot of different things, and you kind of need to narrow in and do a few things really well, and then later you can branch out, I think was helpful to us. What lab resources do you have available? Physical or virtual? You could make something like this work in a physical classroom. I'd still recommend installing virtualization software such as VirtualBox and make administration a lot easier. But if you have the ability to leverage an environment like VMware vSphere, where students can actually navigate to the VMware vSphere interface and interact with virtual machines there, that's more of a centralized solution that's a lot easier to administer. Make sure rules are clear. So you want students to understand as they participate in this, these techniques are not to be used outside the competition and only within that specific isolated environment. So we ask students to acknowledge that before participating. One good way to get students to participate as you start this is to integrate it into an existing class. And so if you have a cybersecurity class or an ethical hacking or penetration testing class, those are all good options. Some prizes, I put certification vouchers there because I think that's a great one. So for instance, we've provided winners with CompTIA Pen Test Plus vouchers as an example. If not, things like USB drives are always very popular with students as well. But I think if you can have some prize, students appreciate that. Doesn't have to be expensive or a big item though. Resources. So just some things to think about that'll help you as you plan this. So if you focus on industry certifications, so I give some examples here. CompTIA Security Plus, Pen Test Plus, and then Easy Counsel has a certified ethical hacker. Any of these would be options to look at. We personally use the CompTIA Pen Test Plus, and that really helps us narrow the skills we want students to learn within the scope of an industry certification exam that's very well known. Now, if you need either your faculty to have professional development training or you just need to have some content so students can learn the skills to get to the point where then they can participate, I just wanted to put some content providers that we personally use that we've had success with. So Cisco Networking Academy, a lot of folks are familiar with that one. They're great. They have a lot of different courses, including some in cybersecurity. CompTIA Academy is something to look into if you're not a member, free to join, certification discounts for students, and a lot of resources available. NDG, they provide NetLab services for Cisco Networking Academy, but they also provide a number of other labs such as cybersecurity and digital forensics and for Security Plus, and so that's another good one to look into. And in some cases, though, we've developed our own labs built around virtualization in our environment, which we use VMware vSphere. And so our students complete labs using VMware vSphere virtual machines, and we've developed steps and walkthroughs and things. And so that's the other option that we've done. Creating a lab environment. Some things to think about. This isn't an all-inclusive list, but just some ideas. So virtualization, I think, is a really strong, good option if you want to host your own competition. I mentioned VMware vSphere and VirtualBox already as a couple of options. One thing you'll have to do is build a vulnerable operating system so that students can try to use penetration testing techniques against it. So I would recommend using Windows 10 or 11 for that because those are modern operating systems. And what you want to do is show students that these techniques work on modern systems. It's not just really old, out-of-dated systems, but even modern systems can have these issues. Now, a way to find vulnerabilities to use to create your vulnerable operating system is to check different databases in, and I provide a link there of one to look at, but there are more. You want to use penetration testing tools. Kali Linux is an option, but there are many others. Ensure your lab environment is isolated students will be working in, because you don't want students to run a vulnerability scanner or try to use penetration testing techniques outside of your isolated environment, right? That could be a big problem. So that's a key you want to make sure of. And just test thoroughly. Make sure that whatever systems you set up, whether it's the attacker station the student will use or the vulnerable station that they'll actually try to exploit, just try all kinds of different things, because they're going to try all kinds of different things, and you want to, as best you can, make sure that it'll function as well as it can throughout the competition. A few tools here that I did want to note that are just, I think, some foundational tools that are good if you're new to this to get started. And so Nessus is a vulnerability scanner, and the great thing about it is they have a free education version for students. You can see the URL there. So I would recommend looking into that. It's a great tool where if you set up a vulnerable station, students could use that vulnerability scanning tool to essentially scan it and figure out what vulnerabilities might exist, and then they can try to exploit those. And so that's a great tool, free educational version. Nmap's one I put on here because I think that's a great one for students to learn and use. It's great for network discovery tasks, identifying live clients and open ports. And then Metasploit is something that is used and is very modular, and is used to exploit system vulnerabilities, or at least attempt to. And so I put some screenshots here on the side of essentially those tools in action. But those are all good foundational tools. And so Nmap and Nessus kind of provide some of the initial work where students can identify which clients are on a network, what open ports might exist for them to try to use penetration testing techniques, and then which vulnerabilities actually exist that are identifiable. Because once you have that piece of information, then you can actually start looking at, okay, well, what exploits exist for the vulnerabilities that exist? And then you can try using things like Metasploit. And so these are just a few ideas that hopefully give you some insights and things to think about as you develop your competition. And so I thank you for viewing the poster, and I wish you the very best, and I hope you enjoy the symposium. Thanks.